Hey, listeners. Welcome to When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a podcast dedicated to censorship and the arts. I'm your host, Todd Sullivan, and over there is my co-host, Oren Barter.
Hello, everybody.
And today, we are taking our first look at the Autobiography of Malcolm X. Hey, how are things, Oren?
Not too bad.
Good.
Yeah.
I was thinking, before we got started with the discussion, there was an interesting censorship-related news story that came across, didn't come across my desk. It came to my attention yesterday that I thought was worth bringing up. There were a number of Reddit or subreddits that were closed down relating to sort of alt-right stuff. But on top of that, I thought this was very bizarre. The Donald Trump's Twitch channel has been temporarily shut down.
His Twitch channel. He has a Twitch channel.
I don't know what it is.
I mean, not anymore, but he had a Twitch channel.
It's temporarily shut down. It's not permanently banned, but
right.
But apparently he had a Twitch channel. I imagine it was probably disseminating some kind of political or governmental information, but I decided not to even bother finding out what that was, and instead, in my headcanon, I'm just assuming that he was streaming video games from the White House. So I thought it would be interesting. Let's see if we can figure out if Donald Trump was a Twitch streamer. What do you think he'd be streaming?
Oh God. What would Donald...
I was thinking...
Go ahead.
I was thinking of something like Call of Duty.
Right.
Either, it's going to be like a very, big military kind of shooter, or it might be more of like a military strategy game like Command and Conquer, where he can pretend to be like a military mastermind overlooking everything.
See, no, I think you're giving a little bit too much credit. I think he would be streaming Minecraft. And in creative mode. Because he wants to feel like a god.
Right.
And I think he would be telling the listeners, like, I'm going to build the biggest underground bunker that anybody has ever seen in the history of bunkers.
What if he just wants to build...
Huge. Huh?
He wants to build a wall just across the entire Minecraft world.
So, I mean, right now I'm just doing a prototype in this really sophisticated architectural simulation. Mm-hmm. This is the wall that we're going to place on the border, okay? I could see that. That's he would be streaming Minecraft and being completely lost about it.
And maybe he's playing Animal Crossing and learning how to screw over people by watching what Tom Nook does. Anyhow, I just thought it was absurd that Donald Trump apparently had some kind of presence on Twitch.
That is fucking funny. It probably wasn't even Trump. It probably was just his campaigin.
Yeah, I don't think it would be him personally.
Audience or something. Yeah.
Connect with the kids. What are the kids playing these days?
Yeah.
See if you can lure in.
Mr. Trump, we're finding that racism isn't really polling well with the 18 to 27-year-olds. But they do spend a lot of time on Twitch.
All right. Anyway, let's get into the book. Today we're talking about the first section of the Autobiography of Malcolm X, as told to Alex Haley, which I thought was a really interesting kind of subtitle or a descriptor for it, because normally when you think of an autobiography, it's something that was written by the person who wrote the book, unlike a straight biography, which is written by a third person about somebody.
So it's kind of like dictated
In this case, it seems like, it was either dictated or I don't actually know the details, whether it was, dictated or whether he actually sat down in a room with Haley and, spoke to him and recorded it. It would be interesting to find out whether or not, because I found a great chunk of the book so far, at least, does feel like a story that's being told rather than one that's being written. It flows in that kind of very natural way of someone who's just telling a story.
Yeah, like this is what I went through. These are the parts that I want to tell you about in this order, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there were other points too, like I think it was chapter 3 or chapter 4, where a good chunk of the chapter was all about his time sort of in the big city doing a bunch of Lindy hopping. Yeah, and I it felt a little bit like, I don't know if I would have expected him to have sat down and spent that much time just talking about the Lindy Hop straight, or whether or not that was maybe culled together from a couple of different sessions where he maybe broke off and talked about the Lindy Hop at different times. So how much of the book was explicitly narrated from beginning to end, and how much might have been edited together after the fact to give it maybe a better sense of narrative?
I mean, I think it could have been all in one go. I feel like it was very important to him turning into a man and identifying as a person, right? I think it sounded, when I was reading it, it sounded like they were very important years.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
Fondly remembered, right?
Mm-hmm. And before we go too much further on the book, I wanted to talk a little bit about language. Because this book was written in I think Malcolm X died in 1965, so I imagine this book was done not too long before that, so I'm thinking 1964. It was published not long after his death. And so that's important to keep in mind, because as I started reading the book, I was a bit mortified at the constant use of the word Negro, which is not in like any use at all anymore, right? At least I haven't noticed it, but it was sort of the given appropriate term at that time.
But it seemed like when the white people would speak and use the term, they would drop the ro and go with the
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, amongst the white people, they would be using the slang, the N-word that we're not going to say because that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
But when Malcolm X was speaking, he is constantly using the word Negro. Because that was, again, like I said, that was sort of the common respected term of 1965 or 1964. That's obviously changed. And I found myself wondering, because I thought, we should obviously be endeavoring to use the right language as we talk about it in this podcast. And a couple of weeks ago, while I was in an exchange on Facebook over the Black Lives Matter protests, I made a reference to, black people, and I had someone come in a comment to correct me and say that should be African American.
Right.
And I found myself initially going, oh God, did I make a mistake? And then I wondered, well, did I make a mistake? Because, I've kind of heard both terms used interchangeably. And so I was curious. And I did do some Googling, and I'll admit I am not, an expert on language. And, it was only sort of a brief bit of Googling, but it does seem like, for the most part, either term is acceptable.
Right. Yeah.
And the one thing that I thought was interesting is that African American is generally meant to specifically describe the descendants of people who were brought from Africa to America as slaves.
Right.
Whereas, black people describe, anyone of that kind of ethnicity. So if you had someone who had maybe been born in England and moved to America and they were black,
it might not be.
Yeah. But I think, either or is pretty interchangeable for this discussion. We're going to avoid...
We hope. If we are wrong, please let us know.
Absolutely. If we're wrong, please let us know, because, again, I want to point out that we are two very privileged white male dudes who are in part doing this because we would like to better ourselves and learn more. So yeah, absolutely. School us if we need to be schooled. And we won't be using the word Negro, except for these few times at the beginning, despite how often
it does show up,
used it.
a lot in the book. And it was just his way of describing, I think.
Well, and again, it was what was appropriate at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you touched on the one that really, like every time it came up, it really stood out for me. I'm not used to seeing that word.
Yeah.
So, I think, that was pretty much the only one. I mean, other than, the cool cat, reefer, the hipster language of I'm assuming it was the 30s. I can't remember exactly when he. It was funny in the way that when he described himself speaking during those times, and you could feel that his manner of language had changed drastically. Mm-hmm. Like he almost made it a point to point it out.
Well, yeah, he opened one chapter with a paragraph of that hipster style language. Mm-hmm. And then kind of the next paragraph, he was immediately kind of mocking himself for himself at that time, the way he spoke and, how wrapped up in that kind of culture he'd become.
Right, because we all know how ridiculously we are as teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I was surprised, because following along through the story, when he started working on the train and as he was starting to get into sort of the bigger cities and visiting, New York and Harlem and stuff, I kind of got disconnected from the passage of time. And when it came up that he was only 16 at that time, it was kind of like, oh, holy crap, this guy is, advanced into getting around and exploring society rather quickly.
Well, he did it really quickly before the train, like before New York and all that, with his move to stay with his half sister Ella.
Yeah.
He really, and that she kind of said, "Don't rush into getting a job, right? I want you to go explore." And he kind of took that in stride and really went with it. And he seemed like he had always been, from that point on, fairly independent.
Yeah, that's the thing is, it's the independence that struck me and why it seemed kind of, and I guess too, like it seemed that he moved from a number of different jobs fairly rapidly, all of them kind of an improvement on the other. Mm-hmm. And then also, I mean, some of the stuff that he got involved with, early on as like the shoe shine boy, where he's also hooking people up with drugs or, making connections with the, escorts or whatever. And it all seems like something you wouldn't expect this.
Because I think he was like kid. 13. No, he wasn't 16. I think he was.
No, by then, I guess that's true. Right.
He was
fair.
Even younger when he started doing that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think his time in the Big Apple, he was 16. As far as that's how I remember it. I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's right. At least as far as my memory too.
But he seemed to, spark this strong sense of independence. And we had talked about this earlier after his talk with his teacher. Mm-hmm. Was it his English teacher?
I think it was. I don't 100% remember, but
you brought it up, so I'll let you bring it up in the podcast.
Yeah, no, it was one of those because so first of all, there hasn't been a lot in these first. I don't know if I said we've covered from the introduction to the end of chapter 5 is what we've read so far, and there certainly wasn't anything in those initial chapters that I would think is worth banning a book over. We're not in that area.
Oh, yet. Absolutely not. Yeah.
But there have been some interesting glimpses into the reality of the past as as an African American or as a Black person in America. And one of the earlier ones that came, I think, in the first chapter was talking about the visits of the Ku Klux Klan at his family's home, having to, escape their house while it was on fire. One of the things that really stood out to me as kind of mind-boggling was this idea where at one point his father had shot one of the Klan members for, trespassing with a gun that was illegal to own because as a black person, he was not allowed to get a firearms license. And it just struck me as absurd because, that whole example of I have a legal right to own a gun to defend my property as an American is so ingrained in so much of the American mindset.
Yep.
That it seems so crazy that at that time there was this whole swath of Americans that literally couldn't even do that. And then, on top of that, I think there was mention of the fact that...
When did African Americans get the vote? I mean, we're talking, it's not that long ago when these
I know.
When the basic human rights were not offered.
Everything that's happening in this book happened less than 100 years ago.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. But it makes you think, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the fact, I mentioned the first chapter, that I believe everyone, his father and all of his uncles except one, I think, died by violence.
Mm-hmm.
And then I marked it down in my notes because he himself wrote in the book, "It has always been my belief that I too will die by violence." And that's a little chilling to read in a book that, we know was, put together months, maybe a year before he was assassinated.
That was just his reality. That's what he had seen.
That's what he'd seen. That's what he lived.
That's what he lived.
Yeah.
Right.
And obviously it was somewhat prophetic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as you were saying, about the teacher, again, this sort of window into what the day-to-day life was like for Black Americans at that time. He was, by all accounts, within the top sort of 3 students in his school. And
at many times the top, I think.
At many times the top, yeah. It was sort of vying between these 3 students. Sometimes he was on top, sometimes it was one of the other ones. And so, as was customary, and I don't recall what grade this was, but as was customary, the teacher, asked him at one point what he wanted to be when he grew up. And Malcolm X had said he wanted to be a lawyer. And his teacher basically said, "Oh, well, that's not ever going to happen.
For you. That's not going to happen. You. For you is what he said."
Right. Again, basically because of his color.
Yeah.
And, suggested that he go into something like carpentry because he'd always been really good with his hands. This is something where you could make a decent living. But basically the message is because of the color of your skin, you need to abandon your dreams. Right.
And I believe every other student that went in, because he was the only student of color at that school.
Yeah.
But every other student that went in to have that conversation with the same teacher, no matter what their dream was, they got the unwielding praise.
Mm-hmm. And I guess I found myself wondering after I read that, that's just one incident of that. How many other times has that happened over the years where someone's, dreams were crushed just because of the color of their skin? And stop to think about how many great doctors, how many great scientists, how many great writers or artists we never got because of those moments. Who knows? We could have had huge advancements in cancer research right now if smart, young Black kids had been properly encouraged.
I mean, for someone as intelligent and hardworking as Malcolm was, I think that moment kind of broke him in a way. He really, he already distrusted and hated the system, and for good reason. But he seemed to have a sort of hope that if he did everything right, he could overcome. And he did everything right. And it was slapped in his face that it still wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things that I thought was interesting as far as sort of the before and after of that moment, when he talked about, the other kids at his school or some of the, the other families that he interacted with, or even the other teachers, he would talk about how sometimes they'd call him, the N-word or other racial slurs. But he was always sort of quick to say, but they were nice people and, they just didn't know any better. At least when he was talking about the kids sort of before that moment, when the teacher told him to sort of abandon the idea of becoming a lawyer. And then the way he started reacting to those things afterwards, it became, much less benign, as I think he began to get a sense of, there was this kind of overall systemic oppression going on, and that, even if you dismissed those little things as, oh, it's just a word, they're nice otherwise.
Yeah.
It was all part of this much bigger problem.
And I don't think that he, for a minute, thought that it didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like I said, he just thought that through hard work and he could overcome.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, I guess in a way, just made it so much more real and so much more hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though I can't even imagine the things that he went through before that at the hands of the white people, white racists, his father being killed.
Mm-hmm.
It just, and yet he was able to move on from that. Like, I can imagine being able to move on from that. Like, what kind of strength does it take to do that?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't been in any situation even remotely close to that. So,
I mean, but he didn't take it in stride. I mean, he did in the best of ways, but he didn't take it the way that he was supposed to take it. And I think that was a really brave and great thing to do. So fuck that teacher.
That's a spicy take. Although in a way, as he said himself, it kind of did set him down this path, and without that kind of change of perspective, we probably never would have gotten Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways that's probably good. I'm sure in some ways that's, maybe wasn't fantastic for him. It's not for me to decide whether or not his was the best path it could have been.
Right. But a bad decision with good consequences is still a bad decision.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There was one thing, from the introduction, and I don't remember, there are sort of two introductions to the volume of the book that I'm reading. One is by
on your version,
Malcolm X's son, and one by M.S. Handler. And I don't remember which section of the introduction this is from. I think it might be from the section by M.S. Handler, but it was a discussion about why Malcolm X seemed so, or why the white man felt that Malcolm X was so dangerous. And I thought this was a really interesting distinction. And the reason was that he said the white man could sense that he wanted black people to be liberated from American society rather than integrated with American society. And that really stood out to me because it's an important distinction. And B, I can totally relate to that desire. Like after I read that, I got thinking about, imagine you're a black person in America in 1940, 50, 60, and you are a descendant of someone who was ripped from their home, brought to this country in chains, forced into servitude for likely generations. And now, after all of that, all they're going to say to you is, well, I guess you live here now.
Mm-hmm.
You have to try to join us, I guess. To have a reaction of like, what the fuck? Absolutely not. I think is pretty understandable.
And unfortunately, a lot of them lost large parts of their heritage.
Oh, totally.
So, I mean, yeah, you want to be your own person, but what do you have? What do you have to go by?
Mm-hmm.
You have what's been force-fed you your whole life and your parents' life and Christianity.
And really the idea of just sort of sliding casually into the society that did your ancestors wrong for hundreds of years.
Just being like, oh, okay, well, you signed a piece of paper that makes us human. We're cool, bro.
Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah. Don't even trip, dog. Yeah, no. No, I get you. It's
so it's interesting because I had never thought of it that way before, and I'm because of that I'm quite interested to get further into the book and seeing some of Malcolm X as a political figure and his push for, I guess, for liberation from American society rather than integration.
Yeah, it touched on it briefly in the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be, I would like, as you probably, to kind of understand more of the specifics of what he had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I totally cut you off.
No, it's fine. Just like I said, like that distinction was really, it's really simple,
mm-hmm.
but it's not something I'd really thought about before. And it kind of opened my eyes a little bit. That's, I guess, what I was trying to say. And I guess it informs not just among, Americans' relationships to, or, white people in America, their relationship with black people, but also, white people in Canada and our relationship with First Nations.
Mm-hmm.
How easy and how dismissive it is for people who are saying, oh, it was so long ago, can't we just get over it?
Mm-hmm.
No, because it's not just like, it's such an upheaval of people's, and not just people's, but families and generations of lives, in ways that, effects are still being felt now.
Yeah. Extra generational trauma.
Right? Yeah. You can't just be like,
I was just going to say what one generation goes through is felt by the next. And, things may get better, but there's still that trickle-down effect.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to come down too hard on the people who are like, can't we all just get along? Because, I mean, that's obviously a fine desire and a fine goal. But I do think it dramatically oversimplifies.
Yeah, I think they use it to deflect a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it's... I don't know if it's as sincere as it's...
Well, I think it's probably sincere, but it's also one of those things that I think comes from a place of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And
because you think if you follow the rules and you're nice to people and, things will go your way.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. You can do everything right as Malcolm did and still be told you're not good enough to be anything more than a carpenter. And he was getting along. He was getting along fine. He was still, and I would like to think that it's different today, but I honestly don't think that it's that much better.
I am probably inclined to agree with you. I mean, maybe I was going to say maybe fewer houses being burned down by the KKK, but I mean, there have been some mysterious hangings in the U.S.
Oh God, yeah, that was, yeah,
a little shocking. I mean, potentially quote unquote suicides, but come on.
Yeah.
But my thought for present day, I think, coming from, or as far as the comments like, can't we all just get along? I do think maybe the most important thing that people, white people, let's say, let's even go a step further and just say privileged people can do is learn about their privilege and learn what it means. Because again, so many people are like, how am I privileged? I had to work a minimum wage job. And it's like, it's not what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, I mean, although that is a privilege, there are different types of privilege.
There are different types of privilege, certainly.
There's a privilege that comes with wealth. There is a privilege that comes with being the face of the majority of a country.
Mm-hmm.
There is privilege that comes from having certain athletic abilities or height. There's height privileges. There's weight privileges. There's, symmetrical face privileges. There are all kinds of privileges. White privilege isn't this thing that you're given when you're a kid and it makes your life better.
Here's your
but
white
it is.
card.
It's not something that you can say, hey, here's my privilege. It's written on a piece of paper. They gave it to me when I was 5.
Yeah.
Have it back. It doesn't work that way.
But it's pretty much a guarantee that you, on some level, had an easier time of it than someone else with a different color skin.
Absolutely. Right. Like I've heard.
Doesn't mean you had an objectively easy time of it. You could have struggled, but it was comparatively easier to others who didn't share your pigmentation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Should we get back to the book a bit? I feel like we're meandering.
Yeah, we are.
I mean, I don't
getting
mind
onto a
meandering,
soapbox a little bit.
I feel like I almost feel guilty too, white guys trying to explain what this is. It's not really for us to say.
No, that's true. But
yeah,
we did decide to go down the path of being two white guys talking about the autobiography of Malcolm X.
This is true. This is true. We did make that decision.
Dug our own potential grave here.
Possibly. Please love us, everybody.
And I guess, my message, so I don't want to speak about, what the experience of, being a black person in America is, because I don't have that perspective. But I do feel like I can speak from the perspective of trying to understand white privilege, because that is something that I've experienced. And it is something that I have really only in the last couple of years probably managed to sort of wrap my head around what it means.
And a lot of the privilege that you have experienced, it wasn't something that was really pointed out to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not something that is so obvious to you, but it is obvious to somebody who does not have it.
Oh, yeah. I'm just speaking at some of your notes now so we can get in some of the things that you wanted to talk about. There was something about going to the theater. I think they were watching Gone with the Wind.
Right. Okay. I thought that this was kind of a double whammy on the band side of things. We are reading a book that has, although I was able to get it on Google Play, but it has been, has it been banned from libraries or banned from crossing the border? What was the banning of this particular book?
So specifically what happened with Gone with the Wind, and this is another one where I think a lot of people online got their knickers in a bunch over nothing. It was never banned. It was temporarily taken off of, I believe it was HBO Max. Mm-hmm. It was temporarily taken down from a streaming service so that they could put it back up with proper historical context.
Okay.
So I believe they now have like an introduction to the film that talks about, how things were in that era. They now have like little maybe interstitials that pop up, explaining certain things that happen in the film. Mm-hmm. I do think it's back on HBO Max again. And I think that sort of thing is actually important because especially if we're going to argue, as I think we should, that some of these things need to be preserved because they show how things were historically. And we don't want to necessarily whitewash our transgressions because that does make it easier to not learn from them. But instead of just keeping them up as they are.
Yeah, just saying like, you can't change this. This has to stay. Yeah, add some context.
Exactly.
Yeah. But the one part in the book that got me thinking that this might be an interesting topic to bring up at this point. He says that he is in the theater watching Gone with the Wind, and during one part he has to hide his head. And I have never watched the movie, but I'm wondering what point that might be. And I will watch the movie here as soon as I can, and maybe try and watch it from his perspective, and maybe see at what points I would become incredibly embarrassed. It just
that's interesting because I don't know either because I've never seen the film, so I wouldn't know where to begin.
But obviously, for him to put that in the book, there must have been something in there that made him either uncomfortable or embarrassed or ashamed.
Yeah,
for him to hide his head in the movie theater.
Well, I wonder. My guess, and I mean this is obviously speculation, but from having seen The Birth of a Nation, which is another film that has a really horrifying depiction of Black people. Mm-hmm. One of the things that stood out to me in that film was the way it depicted slaves as essentially being incredibly happy to be slaves and not wanting to be freed, like basically begging their owners to not let them be freed because they wanted to continue to be slaves.
Which is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was in Gone with the Wind, but
right.
Again, I have no idea.
Yeah, I need to see that to speak on the topic properly. But it got my curiosity flowing when I heard that he was in the movie theater watching that particular movie and felt the need to hide his head. And then to hear that it had been removed, and now I understand the reasons why now. But it was interesting to hear those two things so close to each other.
Yeah, for sure.
Made me want to find what the connection was, right?
Yeah. Well, we are at a point right now where there's a lot of, I think, well, definitely reaction, potentially overreaction to, I don't want to say, it's not overreaction to the Black Lives Matter movement, but it's maybe the wrong reaction with, whether or not taking Aunt Jemima off the syrup was, I mean, it's obviously more sensitive, but was that the most pressing problem to be dealt with?
It was, honestly, it was something, and something.
Yeah, I know, but I mean,
needs to happen at every aspect of society. And I think that if the company wants to stand in solidarity with the protesters and say this is some little thing that we will do to, I don't know, to just show our support, then I am all for that. I think that was a great decision. I have recently come across a couple of posts that have made the decision make even more sense to me. I think that a company showing their solidarity is a great thing, whether we're butthurt by it or not.
Oh yeah, no, I don't care about the butthurt.
I'm not saying that, removing those types of ad figures are going to solve everything. or that they're the root of the problem, but it's something.
Yeah, and I don't mean to criticize that decision, because you're absolutely right. Every step is helping, and having that image there, as long as it's been there, continues to disrespect the history of what that image means and meant. I guess it's more just the idea that in the wake of people saying we want police to stop shooting us as often,
mm-hmm.
to have the solution be, well, let's take this picture off of a jar of syrup, is maybe not helping in the way they kind of want to be helped.
Well, I agree. I think that the major problem is police brutality, and more specifically police brutality towards people of color. But they're also protesting just systemic racism. I can't talk. Systemic racism in their country, in all levels, in all
mm-hmm.
places.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like you say, that gesture isn't going to solve the core problems, but I'm sad that we're talking about it so much. I think when I heard that happened, I was like, okay, cool.
Oh yeah, me too.
There was something, they felt there was something they could do, and they did it. And I feel like there shouldn't have been any backlash. I think the company was just trying to show their solidarity. But I, honestly, I don't think there's anything that I would consider to be too far.
Too far as what?
I mean, the removing of Aunt Jemima, or pulling Gone with the Wind off, which I now understand wasn't
mm-hmm.
full time or a complete deal. I kind of just want everybody to do everything they can, and then just to see what we're left with at the end, and see what we want to bring back, and see what we want to have, and see what isn't offensive and what doesn't suppress. And I'm okay with everything kind of falling apart at the moment.
Well, I think the thing too, when it comes to Aunt Jemima and it comes to Gone with the Wind, these aren't cases of censorship, really. They're cases where individual corporations are making decisions about their products.
Now, do you think maybe there's a hint of greed involved in that as well? Do you think maybe they're seeing the popularity of this movement and they're like, we don't want to have any negative views from these people, so maybe
totally
that could be it. Maybe I'm giving them
I honestly don't think that the company behind Aunt Jemima is standing in solidarity with anyone except their shareholders. I think they saw it as an opportunity to revise their branding in a way that's more friendly, and I'm sure it's all about profit.
Okay.
In fact, I mean, it's almost guaranteed, the way corporations are built, they don't do things out of generosity or to stand in solidarity with things. They do it because it will generate more money for them.
Okay. One problem at a time, though.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, if they can make more money while also, reducing a negative stereotype of, Black Americans, that's great. I think that's a victory.
We should just do a podcast on how much we hate corporations, because I could go on forever. But I think we should maybe get back to the book. There was one part in the book where I think it was their history teacher was reading the only section of the entire course on Black history. And it was one paragraph long.
Mm-hmm.
And he laughed through the entire thing and ended speaking about it, or reading it, I suppose, ended reading it by making fun of Black people. This is a teacher. This is somebody who's shaping the minds of the people in front of him. And already, African American experience has been compressed into one short, tiny part of an entire book.
Yeah.
And when he gets to that point, he can't even say it with a straight face.
Mm-hmm.
It just, like, all these things that he brings up about his early childhood, it makes you angry.
Well, one of the things I wondered from that segment is, I wonder what Black history in the American education system is like now. I mean, it's obviously going to be better than that, but I feel like it's still not where it could be or should be.
It's probably still very whitewashed. I mean, we could try and find some American books on it.
Possibly. I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is last year, tons of people, and myself included, became aware of this historical event called, I think it was the Black Wall Street Massacre, because of the Watchmen TV show on HBO. And it was basically this historical event where black people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, had basically created their own sort of affluent area,
Mm-hmm.
which became known as Black Wall Street, because of the success of the people there. And at a certain point, a bunch of white supremacists basically attacked the place, killed everybody, and it's just kind of not even talked about. And it became sort of this huge, it was the starting point of the series on HBO, and it was the first time that a lot of people learned about it. It was just either late last year or early this year that the city of Tulsa said that they would finally start including that event in their history classes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and so it seems clear that to this day that absolutely there is a huge amount of whitewashing of, the history of what, African Americans had to struggle through. And, I'm not going to say it's warranted, but I can certainly understand why Americans are generally ashamed of it and why they'd want to keep it under the surface. But, yeah. Makes me try to remember what coverage of early Canadian settler interactions with First Nations was like when I was in elementary school, because I imagine it's probably very similar. A lot of whitewashing the details, and
explorers came and provided weapons and
yes,
fancy tools.
Yes,
and also
friendly Thanksgiving stories about sharing our bounties instead of passing on smallpox.
I mean, yeah, on purpose.
Every nation, I guess, has shame in their background somewhere. I think we're nearing the end, whether or not, unless you have anything else.
No, I just wanted to say that the first 5 chapters of the book I found were a great read. I found the flow very casual.
Yeah.
I had no problem getting lost in it, picturing, his zoot suit, and, Lindy hopping.
Yeah.
And to hear about all the musicians that he had the chance to hear, and some even interact with. And, so far it's been, other than his very early years and a few points in between, it seems like it's a story of a man who's really overcome and just tried to be happy. Just tried to find some enjoyment. Tried to find his place.
Yeah.
And I mean, we know how the story ends. I'm assuming there's going to be some much more heartbreaking events coming up. But I have to say, I am really enjoying learning this man's story.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's got a really great voice. I think he's a great storyteller in this book, and I agree. I really enjoy sort of just getting into the flow of his words and the story he's telling, and I'm really excited and curious to see where the rest of this, I'm sure, will be very, very interesting life goes, even though, as you said, we know how it all ends.
So what do we got for him next time? Is it 6 through 10? Chapters 6 through 10?
Let me have a quick look. I think it's probably something like that. I think we're going 6 through 12.
Okay.
Sorry, I should say I'm wrong. It's 6 to 11.
Okay. And then 12 to 19?
12, that would be... I don't know. It's hard to figure out right now.
Okay, yeah, don't worry about it right now. I just wanted to say, just bring up that we've got chapter 6 to 11 coming up for the next podcast.
I think that's worth mentioning, especially if people wanted to read along with us. I know there was somebody on my friends list who mentioned that he had a copy on his bookshelf, and this might finally inspire him to pick it up and read it. So, if people are interested in reading along, we are doing these podcasts on the first and third Sundays of every month, and we will try to include what we're reading for the next section. Chapters 6 through 11 for next time. Any final thoughts?
Just that I hope we didn't whitewash his legacy through this.
Again, like if we're doing a bad job of things and you're listening, please let us know. Our mission here is to try to be better educated, privileged white guys. Hopefully we're doing an okay job of communicating our understanding of what's going on in the book, and hopefully our white privilege is not, bleeding out too much. I guess that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for listening. My name was Todd. Still is Todd. I'm Todd. He's Oren.
And my name... Oh, you got it?
No, who are you?
My name is Oren Barter.
And I'm Todd Sullivan. Thanks for listening. Till next time. Bye.